To say that DCU has had a bit of a rough journey is quite the understatement, as it seems like most of the films that have come from this expanded universe range from hits critically and financially, such as Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all that sort of stuff. It hits critically with the Suicide Squad, Shazam, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and some more mixed to disappointing like Wonder Woman 84, Batman v Superman, 2016 Suicide Squad, and with varying levels of financial outcomes, as well as studio interference, confusing outcomes, and everything under the financial sun of the DC universe. Now we come to a film that has been labeled as a reset to the new DCU timeline and for a hopeful future, but today we'll talk on the one that is rebooting the series in particular, and that is with the long-awaited film adaptation of The Flash, a film that started development in concept around a decade ago in 2014. Or actually no, I believe it's since the 80s, but they then became part of the expanded DCEU universe. But the question now is the film any good? Or has it gone off running, or has it stumbled at the starting line and completely tumbled over? Well, I would say it's a bit of a middle ground film with some good points and some bad points, but we'll get into the review and we'll talk on them. Now, of course, this isn't the first time we've seen the Flash in these films, as we've already seen him appear in brief cameos in both 2016's Dawn of Justice and Suicide Squad. He made his full screen debut in 2017's Justice League, and then properly again in the 2021 Snyder Cut. And then he made a cameo in 2 of the TV shows, the first one being last year's Peacemaker series, and then one I think beforehand was in the CW series of The Flash, in a weird crossover scene from around 3 years ago, which we can show the clip here.
Hello? What the hell is this?
Now, after being announced about a decade ago and multiple delays with finding directors, writers, and proper release, some change-up, delays, and possible cancellations because of a certain main lead, we now have the film, and it follows a plot similar to the most well-known of Flash stories, which is Flashpoint, with the plot being as follows. Worlds collide when the Flash uses his superpowers to travel back in time to change the events of the past. However, when his attempts to save his family inadvertently alters the future, he becomes trapped in reality where General Zod has returned, he's threatening annihilation, and with no other superheroes to turn to, he looks to coax a very different Batman out of retirement and also rescued an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for. I don't know the case like which one he's looking for, because the DCU just really hates Henry Cavill's Superman, or Superman in particular. They don't show his head. Now, because of the whole change-ups and everything, the full context of the original plot of Flashpoint is not fully remade here, but for what it's worth, what they have with the story, it does itself well, and given it is a more grounded approach with focusing on a small set of characters instead of a large ensemble like Flashpoint, we'll get to them in a moment, it does its job well enough to feel new, but also familiar to those that have read the comic or watched the pretty good animated film. Now, to give a score on this one, on the story, I'm looking around 7.5. I'm thinking around then. It might be better, but that's probably around the percentage I give it.
Yeah. I'm Batman.
Now we're going to talk about the array of characters, and in this one there's not that many that we could talk about. There's 3 main focal ones and we have a few side characters, so we're going to talk about them in conjunction areas. So our first one is a little tricky, as throughout the film we are following 2 variations of the particular character we're talking about, and that is of course Barry Allen, or the Flash, as we follow the main one from the current day and a younger version from the past who's inexperienced and a lot more clumsy and a bit more rambunctious. Now both of these versions are played by the main lead of Ezra Miller, and for what it's worth, he does a good job. He probably does it his all. He gives it his all throughout this entire film, playing the mentor to an inexperienced one, losing, and then trying to figure out a way to get his powers back after losing them in the freak accident that gave him his powers. It's a whole thing, and he does his best. Depending now if he's going to end up coming back as the character is by all means, but we'll have to see what happens. Reason being is because 1, there's a reboot, and 2, because of all the drama that's been going on the last 12 months with this character, because he's been in the news for a lot of things, including assaults, domestic disturbances, breaking and entering, trespassing, cult-like behavior, robbery, and a few other things that many assume this is going to end up getting this film cancelled initially, like they did with Batgirl, saying that would hurt the DCU. I mean, these didn't hurt him. But, if what it's worth, he did a decent job playing 2 variations, and if he comes back or not, it's all up in the air. Now, for this next character, I'm thinking just to slip in a bit more subtle because, just to talk about this next character in particular. I'm Batman. Yes, we're talking about the Dark Knight. In particular, two variations of Batman. So we'll start with the smaller one, which is Ben Affleck's one. Now, he's not in it much, but he does have some nice moments between him and Barry, as well as a nice action sequence at the beginning of the movie with the whole hospital and stuff like that. But we'll talk about that later in the presentation stuff. He does well, and if this is his last performance, he was a pretty good Batman, I will have to say. Ben Affleck does a pretty good Batman. Be interested to see what his Batman movie was like, so see how it goes. Now, of course, we gotta talk about the one that was majorly focused in the marketing of this whole thing, and that is, of course, Michael Keaton's Batman, which I believe is close to this mask, but I think this is a Dark Knight mask, so. Anyway, this one is focused on a more older Bruce Wayne who's been in retirement for years. Gotham's a safe building, but he comes to retirement to help Barry restore the timeline, all that sort of stuff. And when I thought it was just gonna be a mentor cameo role, it actually turned to be a lot more than that, and it actually does some pretty cool action sequences. It's cool to see Michael Keaton kick ass as the Dark Knight again. Back to the original character that made him dark and brooding, when for the 60s he was whatever this was. But yeah, basically, if he does a pretty good job, and I wish the background movie was still happening and his cameo in Aquaman was still going to be a case, because he was pretty cool and I would love to see more of him again in the future. But at the moment, he's currently over in the MCU becoming a Vulture, and it's, he's getting Morbin timed with Morbius, so give it that. Now, when you think of the other DC characters, you most think besides Batman and Wonder Woman, the one that completes the trinity is, of course, the Man of Steel himself, or Superman. Now, in this particular one, it's not Superman. We were going to see a Kryptonian in the film, and in most cases probably would have been Clark Kent, but Warner has treated the Man of Steel, Henry Cavill, really poorly. So it seemed unlikely. So instead, we're introduced to his cousin Kara, who is the one that will take on the role of the Kryptonian this time around, and this is played by Sasha Calle. Now, Kara is a character that doesn't really show up much until at least about the midway point in the film, I would say. About an hour into it. There's at least about an hour and 20 minutes left the film, give or take, with her in it. But what they do have with her in this film is pretty good, if not pretty good. We could see the amount of time they gave her in this film that she has some potential, and she does have her moments and cool action sequences with the whole thing with Batman as well, and she does play the quieter moments well, while also being a bit more anxious or non-trusting to the others and a bit more unhinged compared to Clark, but you get that with being shot by Russians and being experimented on, so you get that kind of thing. And I hope to see more of her in the future. I think there's been talks that she apparently is, so hopefully there's stuff will work out, and we'll just see how it turns out in the future. So let's kind of fly through the rest of the cast, because they're a bit of a mixed bag. So we'll start with the villain. In particular, it's supposedly General Zod. There is one other one, but I don't want to spoil it. The last time we saw him, General Zod was going to get some chiropractic done, and, you could see it had a bit of an effect on him. And since then, we haven't seen much in the form of any Kryptonians since that film, but now, from time travel, we return to the year that he's there. He's kind of wasted, so to say. Like, he shows up at the end, kind of stands there, does a little bit of fighting, and that's really it. That's all we get of Michael Shannon return as General Zod, so it's like, what's the point? I don't know, like, they could have done so much more with him, but, I guess it wasn't really much of a focus. Same could be said with others close to Barry, as his dad, his mom, and Iris make some form of appearances. Iris helps a little bit with, character, systems that come back in time using the Speed Force. His dad's trying to tell him to, stop trying to look too deep into it, and the whole crutch of him going back in time was to basically save his mom from some certain death that she has. They all have their alright moments, and I know in the comics original, it's supposed to be Reverse Flash that caused the death of his mom, but, the basis, it's alright, it's decent enough. I'm sure there's probably reasons to it, so it's fine. And last thing I want to talk about in this movie is really an odd one that some are fine, some are weird, is the cameos. Now, initially, though, we thought Keaton was just going to be a cameo, but then became sort of a main focus role. There is a lot of other cameos in it. I don't want to go into it too much. I might do a spoiler talk about this somewhere in the future, but it's weird the case of the weird cameo choices and how they're presented. One or two, you could definitely feel if those cameos were pushed to more main roles in this film, it would have built more on the Flashpoint storyline. But all the other bits, kind of built onto something that could have been to, big thing, a Crisis Infinite Earths kind of stuff. But, I don't know. Depending in the future, if James Gunn does it, we'll have to see what happens. But just to close it off, all the characters, I think the main leads are all decent and do a good bit of it as well. I do carry it. Other aspects and the villain and stuff feel they could have done better and knock it down a point, but for what it's worth, it's alright. Score these characters score 8 out of 10. I think it's decent enough for the characters. The main leads help it. The side characters, they're not really much of major importance. So let's get right into the presentation of the whole world building and the form of characters, materials, faithfulness, and then of course the big debate of this whole film, the visuals. So on the presentation side of things, it's not much to say, anything really standing out in this film. As a lot of it is really just your basic cities and all your good chunk of the first hour where we have that starting action scene. We're traveling through the Speed Force and end up until they look for help in dire situation, all's fine, some usual stuff, car chases, people in peril, and thousands in property damage that most likely get fixed by the next movie. For the likes of the Wayne Manor and the other action scenes, it did feel something different seeing the manor from the Burton films all over again, which was nice to see after 30 years, give or take. It was 89. Yeah, about 30 years. But yeah, from what they had, and like the big battle of the third act is somewhat aware, causing less property damage by having in the middle of a dusty canyon. So they kind of learned some stuff, and the way they used it to their advantage was good with like the whole powers and stuff. I know the third act is a little messy, but I think honestly for the action sequence it's fine enough. One other thing I did like with presentation actually was the Speed Force. I like the kind of concept of it that's like just like some form of like a treadmill thing, and like it's, you see like a sort of ring of all like the past events, like you see characters in the DCEU and stuff like that, and it's cool. The visuals of it, we'll get to it in the moment, but from what it's worth, I liked it. Now on the basis of faithfulness and costumes, I think honestly the heroes' suits in this are actually pretty cool, as well as like one of the villain ones, like that's all practical. Like I found out about it recently from like behind the scenes stuff, and it's pretty cool. Like just that was all practical, and that's pretty nice. But anyway, the other character ones, like the Flash's design suit, even though it's like kind of an update one from the Justice League movie, it's pretty cool. Like I like the kind of runner's outfit with the futuristic tech to it. Sasha Calle's one is very similar to Superman's outfit, but just a bit more flexibility and durability to it, and it does look cool. And as for the bat suits, there's one in the beginning with Affleck's, it's not really the best looking, kind of looks a bit unfinished. Like if you know and seen the images of the suit, you know what I'm talking about. But as for Keaton's ones, it's cool to see the old style suit with the one that was like a design flaw where they couldn't really turn the head, so like suitcase was like, but it is functional. It's nice to see that old suit again, and for one that worked a purpose for an extra suit for the other Barry. And as for faithfulness to source material, I like what they did in the attempt with making their own Flashpoint with some missing pieces. Like I think it's done enough to the point where it's not one for one, but like what they do with it is pretty cool. Like, you know, instead of Superman, it's Supergirl. Instead of like, you know, Bruce's father, it's just a different version of Bruce Wayne and all different things. But like, it's cool. Like, would I have wanted to see a full version of it? Maybe. Like, there could have been a chance of it. I feel like if the DCU was more structured, I feel like it probably would have happened. But for what it's worth, I think it did decently well. So I'll give it that. Now, for the big point of discussion that everyone points to with this, and that's with the visual effects. Now, I will agree that a lot of the visuals in this movie do look a fair amount of unfinished or just not finished rendering, and there is a lot of it, but in other aspects there is a fair amount of the visuals that do look decent, but is kind of a little more middle ground than fully great for a lot of the visuals. Especially trying to back to the cameos of the film where I mentioned like some of them are weird, even though one or two of them I think are still alive. They could have easily done their cameos. I don't know, you can't tell this shit. Anyway, some point to certain scenes that look really bad. Like one in particular I keep seeing is like this one of the Flash, like first tapping the Speed Force and he returns to the opening action scene. You see his floating head and everyone said it looked terrible. To me, this one looks like at least one of the more decent ones, like in perspective compared to everything else. Like there is worse or floating heads I've seen in other films. Like, it could be a case of just me. I don't know. Now, I know the director of Andy Muschietti came out and stated the CGI of the film looked a bit bad on purpose, but whether that is the case or not, it's hard to say, because it just feels a case it feels lazy sounding, but I don't know. I mean, there's probably a case what you see when you're running super fast, that a lot of visuals look a bit weird, but I don't know. It could be better. To say, but I think it's in the middle of the middle ground when you play it safe a bit with the setting, but have some good ideas to it. Costumes are great. This probably helps it a bit. CGI looks alright. There's some good moments, some terrible looking ones, but there's chance of improvement on it. But you know, to score it, I give it a 7. 7 out of 10 is a reasonable score for a presentation.
Come on, Barbie. Let's go party.
So just in particular this instance, I'm going to place writing, comedy, and a bit with music into all this one because I just want to lump it together. I can't really talk on one particular one aspect on its own loosely. I'll be here all day. So I'm just going to put it all into one piece. It'd be different for other reviews, but you know. So I'll start with the writing anyway. The writing does have some decent amount of writing to it. It feels understandable. It gets the point across, and there's moments it feels nice. It's not over convoluted to say the least, and some of the writing does have some good elements, of course. There's certain exposition here and there, and I think it does work well for what it's set out to do. So I think the writing is a decent aspect to it. The only aspect of it I find a bit lacking, the joke side of things. It's just, to me personally, I remember hearing a lot of things saying it was funny and stuff like that. I don't know. I think it's just some aspects of what I've been hearing the stories wise. But to me, I didn't really laugh a lot in this movie. Like, people said it was sort of very funny in a lot of places, but either I might have missed some of the context in a lot of them, or they might slip by quickly that I completely missed the point. Now, let's say I didn't laugh at points. There's probably one or two instances I did, but I don't know. It's kind of a case where I was thinking, like, Flash is supposed to be sort of a goofy character, sort of like, it might be a bit of a jokester, but I don't know. Just to me personally, didn't really find it as much. Like, I could be on my own, and I'd like to hear what you think. If you thought there was scenes that were funny, that if you have seen this movie, and I'm completely wrong on this, so you let me know down below, or you might agree with me. So, but lastly, on the music side of things, I think that the score composed from Benjamin Wallfish does a very good and decent job for the music. It gets the point across for the scenes and set pieces for the moment being presented on screen. Is it the best score of a super movie? Like, it's give or take, really, with these ones. Kind of alright. It does the job well enough, but, you know, I've heard probably better superhero scores and stuff like that, especially from, like, DC and everything, but, you know, he made a good effort with it. Overall, writing's okay, comedy could have been better, music's decent. I'll give the score around 6.5 or 7, so I'll give it that.
Yeah. Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
Now, as again, like all media and films and stuff I talk about, there's going to be some critiques and issues to them. So I will go through them. I might mention them already, but I'm going to go through them and probably put them in just one place. Okay, so we'll start with story. Not really much of a complaint to say that they should have done a full version of the actual Flashpoint comic into the film, but it's the case because DCU is completely going left, right, and into fucking Jupiter or whatever the fuck. That, you know, it's basically a bit muddled, to say the least, to get a DCU of all the characters that would have been in it, like kind of having fights with the Warner Bros and shit. It's hard to say. If it was more structured, maybe I could see this being the full outcome, but for what they got out of it, it's fine enough. Right, characters. Not really much in the main characters. Maybe a little approach with Kara, but just maybe have a bit more of an appearance with her. But more on the side characters and villain need a bit more development and explanation to the cameos more. As I mentioned, I would go more into like a spoiler review, but I might do that in a rewatch-a-thon discussion I'll do in the DCEU and stuff in the future. Or maybe do a focus video on this. I don't know. Right, so then presentation. Mostly case in the visual effects, looking a little off and not that fully finished. And maybe a bit more of a nicer looking place to look at for, like, you know, presentation, world building kind of thing. Because, like, you can see a lot of these superhero movies, you can always just see, like, cities and metropolises and stuff like that. Maybe somewhere in particular, like, the Speed Force aspect was cool. The whole final area and, like, the deserty area was cool and stuff like that. So, stuff like that, but maybe give a bit more of a context flavoring to it stuff. But, you know, but it's not to a level anyway, like, all this world building was like unbearable to watch and stuff like that, but you know, it could be improved. And then lastly, the writing, the humor, and the score, maybe a little more on the side of humor being better. Just the comedy was weak to me and probably need a bit more of a laugh to it. It may be the case that, because I remember years ago, it's about 2014, they mentioned that DC is trying to be just more serious and tell deeper stories, where Marvel's more kind of like upbeat and have its serious moments, but a lot more of the comedy chops. And surprisingly, that showed how Marvel did well. Like, you know, it's probably one of the biggest film companies in the world right now. Oh, back then, Phase 4 and 5 is a bit of a hit or miss for people. But yeah, you know, a bit of a struggle currently from what I've seen. They had a plan, I'd say, with Snyder. Things got a bit muddled, you know, as most times when studios interfere with, you know, projects, it happens. But it's not all lacking in the funny, but a bit more of it probably would have helped. Writing is fine. There's good moments in it, and the music is decent. But these are only just knockdown aspects, certain percentage points. Did not fully affected to make it a fully bad film. There's a lot more that kind of helps it kind of make it a decent film, so you have that.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
But overall, in the end of all of this, The Flash is a film I'm glad that I at least was happy to see be made after all this time. Is it perfect? No. There is noticeable problems for sure, like development troubles, the made lean concerns, and some things like visual effects and stuff like that. But what they had going for them with this movie, there was a lot that worked. Like, its main leads were entertaining, some action sequences were cool, there was a good bit of writing, and set pieces were fun to witness and listen to. Now, this this film was known from the beginning as the official reboot of the DC Extended Universe, which is now known as the DC Universe. And we have no idea if the likes of the Scarlet Speedster will be zooming onto the big or small screen anytime soon, or if the main lead will be back playing the character again in the future. Because Gunn is planning out his universe with Peter Safran, which is still not all fully unveiled right now. It will be unveiled over time. But I'm sure we'll see what lies in store for this universe. I know that people will hate on DC, mainly for all the Snyder fans, the man that Gunn is replaced by Snyder to run the DCU for him to finish the original vision plan, but he has no intention to. He's off Netflix making Star Wars and stuff that's full of swears and sex. But I have good hope and faith in James Gunn. I mean, I love the Guardians movies. I love Suicide Squad. Like, that was probably one of my favorite movies of 2021. So I have good faith that the DCU and super movies into the future might have some glimmer of hope kind of thing. You know, Marvel will probably pick it back up by the time the multiverse saga ends. DC will probably find some footing and actually make some good property content. We'll see how it goes. And if we do see the Flash again, whether it's with Ezra Miller or someone else in the role, I'm sure I'll give a look into it when the time comes, when he zooms on into the theaters or on TV. So to finally tally the scores for this review, I gave story a 7, characters an 8, presentation a 7, and I gave writing, humor, and music also a 7. So tallying up out of 40, we have 28 out of 40. So collectively a 70%. So, 29. So actually 32.5%, give or take. So, yeah, the idea. But yeah, so well done, Flash. That's decent score. A nice B- grade. Well done. Now, I hope you enjoyed listening to my review for this movie, and if you did, why not give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below on your own opinions of this movie. If you have seen it, what did you think of it? Do you think that it deserves its like disappointing box office, and do you think there was potential with more? And give your thoughts on like my points I made in this video. It's probably my video is completely nonsensical right now, but it's a long process of trying to record this thing. As you can see, I started this earlier in the day. You can see at the beginning of this video, and now it's like 9 o'clock at night and I'm still trying to record this. My voice is cracked up right now. But I'd love to hear what you think. Did you like the movie? Were you indifferent? Did you hate it? I'd love to know. Just to get and give your points in each sector anyway. But I've rambled on too much now. I hope you enjoyed. You stay all being wonderful people, and I will see you all in the next vlog or next video. So take care everybody, and good night.